In this video, I'm going to show you how to control your Chinese diesel heater remotely anywhere in the world, and also set it up so it turns itself on and off based on temperature. Now keep in mind here, I'm giving you one demonstration. I'm demonstrating turning it on and off via the app that we'll talk about in a second. And secondly, I'm going to demonstrate how to turn it on and off based on temperature. There are hundreds of different scenarios that you could create. You could change the temperature range. You can also set it so you can turn it on and off based on different times. There's loads and loads of options, but I'm just still demonstrating one today, high and low temperature, and obviously turning on and off in the app. So let's start. So the tools you're going to need are pretty basic tools, to be fair. The tools you're going to need are as follows. So I use solder acid because I just always find it much easier. Some solder, and what you're looking at there is just basically bits of wire. Yeah, so I'm cutting the blue bits off for these resistors, and I'm just using the legs. And the reason why we're going to use the legs is because soldering it in the gaps of the remote can be quite difficult if you're trying to put a wire on it, i.e. like a normal, 6 gauge, very, very small gauge wire. So by using these legs, it makes it much easier to do. You can use any wire. If you've got fused wire, it doesn't really matter, to be fair. Okay, so moving on. So the other thing you're going to need is obviously a remote control. Now the one I'm using is the 4-button control. Once again, doesn't really matter what control you use. And what I'm going to demonstrate here is, like I said, it's going to be on and off. If you wanted to, there's nothing stopping you actually wiring in another 2 to the temperature controls if you really wanted to. And you could also control that, by your mobile phone, tablet, or online if you wanted to as well. So once again, you're going to need a control. Next up, you're going to need 2. These are 5-volt on-off switches that are. Leave a link in the description below. These use a tiny amount of power. You can power them 2 ways. Number one, you can power them by plugging in a USB cable. As you can see at the top of there's 2 USB cables. Or ultimately, what you can do is you can power it via maybe a DC to DC buck converter on the terminals there. You can see where it says 5-volt and ground. So you can power it 2 ways. It's perfectly up to you. So moving on, we have taken it out of its case now. And what we've done, I've done this quite a few times now with these remotes, and I find that just do it with the 4 legs. So what do I mean by that? So you can see at the very bottom there where the 2 wires are coming off. Basically what you're doing is when you press that switch, you're making a connection between one side of the switch to the other. So when you press it, you're making a connection. So if I was to pull them 2 wires together on, let's say on the left or the right, the 2, and touch them together, that would actually press the remote. So as you can see, I've soldered these small pieces of wire on both sides, and now that gives me the ability, makes it much easier for me now to solder the cables directly to them legs, and I'll probably trim them down a little bit. So next up, you can now see that what I've done is I've, if you look at the top there, you can see that that is the switch there. I've cut the legs down, soldered the little 4 cables on, quite simple. I've also put a little bit of hot glue on there as well, just to stabilize it, because them legs are quite thin. If you bend them about 20 times, they'll probably snap off. Bit of hot glue on there, not going anywhere. Hold them on nice and securely. Now what we need to do is, first of all, there's loads of videos out there. These switches, the app that I'm using here is called the Wifi Link app. It can be found on the iOS and Android store. And what you will see here is I've got lots of devices here. This is actually installed inside of a camper van. And I'm using, on top of this, I'm using something called a Zigbee bridge. It's a Sonoff Zigbee bridge. And I've got a lot of switches connected to that. I've got a mix. I've actually got some Wi-Fi switches as well. And the reason they're offline is because I'm doing this in the house, right? So I'm not actually in the van at the moment. I'm just, you know, creating this in the house, and then once it's done, I'll just put it inside the van. As you can see at the top of the app there, I have already added these two blue switches. Very easy to do. Simply hold down one of the buttons for a couple of seconds, go to the app, click on add, and then once you've added it, it just picks it up, right? And you can name it whatever you want, right? I named one on, one off. Yeah, quite simple, really. Something that we need to do to this switch, what we don't want to do is we don't want to turn this switch on. And what I mean by that, if we turn the switch on, it's going to hold the button down, right? And that's not going to be good, because what that's going to do is it's going to drain the remote battery over the period of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the WeLink app and we're going to turn something called inching on. And inching is basically, it gives you the ability to press a button for a set amount of time. So the definition of on in this case would be on for how long do you want it to be on for, yeah? And you're going to see here, we have the ability to determine that in physical settings, yeah? So you can go into inching, turn it on, then you can say how many seconds you want that on for. So I'm going to go 1.5 seconds. Now, if I come out, and I'll show you a demonstration now, side by side, it goes quite quick. You might have to replay this a few times, yeah, because, you know, it just happens quite quickly. But you get the point, right? So as you saw in that picture, as I was pressing the button, it turned itself on and it turned itself off. And if you look carefully, you would notice as I turned it on, one switch light went red and one of the buttons on the remote went red. So that was identifying that, yeah, that was successful, right? You've pressed the button, the switch is turned on, it's come on for 1.5 seconds, and it's, yeah, done what we wanted it to do. So now we've done that, fantastic, right? So inside the app, we can now go into that app anywhere in the world, turn the heating on, turn it off. I mean, that's great. So we're going to just take it a little bit further now. Some of the issues that I've had with my heater, sometimes it gets too hot, right? And sometimes, yeah, sometimes it gets too hot and it just doesn't turn itself off, obviously. And that's always been a problem for me, because sometimes I leave it on overnight, I get too hot, I wake up, and it's just annoying, right? So this is the main reason I've sort of built this little thing, to turn the heating off late at night and, you know, turn it back on when it gets cold again. And so what we're going to demonstrate here, we're going to demonstrate turning the heater on when it gets to a set temperature and turning it off when it gets to a set temperature. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new scene, right? And the scene is a scenario. And you can do this all within inside the WeLink app. So what we're going to do is go add new. Then we're going to set up basically a routine. We're going to say, right, the cab temperature. When the cab temperature gets to, let's say, 16 degrees, I want you to, I don't know why it goes white there. What I want you to do is I want you to then, I want you to then turn on the heating. So now what we've got there is when the cab temperature gets to X amount, I want you to turn the heating on. Now you do need some extra bits and bobs to do this, yeah. You don't have to do the temperature controlled. I'm using the Zigbee bridge with the temperature sensor. It's about 25-30 quid for the sensor and the control and the little box. The advantage of this over something like an afterburner or something else, because the controller, let's call it, the thing that I put together and made, and the temperature sensor are separate, it gives you more control over controlling the temperature in the van, right? Because now what I can do is, let's just say it's hotter at the top of the van than it is at the bottom of the van, right? If you've got a van, you know what I mean by that. So now you can move the sensor, totally wireless, very tiny little thing, probably about inch and a bit high by an inch and a half wide. It's got a battery in it, lasts 2 years. You can put that now in the position that will be the most comfortable temperature for you, if that makes any sense. And this is the reason for doing this. And we need to do the same thing, because now we're saying turn on at 16 degrees. That's great. But what we want to do is turn it off now when it gets to, say, maybe a sort of highish temperature. knowing that it's white. So we're going to set the temperature. We're going to say the temperature we want it is, let's say 27, maybe 27-ish. Okay. Save that. Save again. Oh, don't know why that didn't. Maybe I didn't click the button there. Let's do that again. Maybe I didn't click on save. There we go. So there we go. We've got two now, as you can see on the screen. We've got an on and an off. It will turn itself off on at 16 degrees, and it will turn itself off at 27. That way, then you can maintain a nice temperature in the van, and yeah, you sort of get the idea. Now, with the son-off device as well, if you want to go down that route, you don't have to. You could just go to sort of the first piece that I've done, you know, just linking it to the app and, you know, turn it on and turn it off. The other thing you can do, if you don't want to go down the line of having the temperature sensor, you can, within that switch setting, yeah, just this basic switch itself, you can put a timer on it. Yeah, so you could say, turn on at, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you can go to the off button and say, turn off at, I don't know, 5 o'clock in the morning. There's so many different combinations you could do here. I mean, you could even say, if I open the door in the van, turn the heating on, you know, there's door sensors as well. You can go nuts, right? I think the reason I like this over any other solution, it just gives you so much more scope in the future. And you can also tie these other sensors and devices into other things in your van to automate it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video and I hope it's helped. Let me know your comments, and maybe if you can see any way that I can improve this, let me know in the comments. Thank you very much. Cheerio.